Market Mantra, Market Mantra, Market Mantra, Market Mantra, Market Mantra, Market Mantra.
This is Akashvani. Good evening and welcome to this edition of Market Mantra, in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. I am Gaurang Dhawanlal and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Vishal Sharma.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंत्र के ताजा अंक में आप सभी का स्वागत है। आधे घंटे के इस कार्यक्रम में हम लाएंगे आप तक आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार की खबरें, साथ ही उन पर चर्चा भी करेंगे। चर्चा के लिए हमारे साथ कार्यक्रम में ऑनलाइन विशेषज्ञ भी जुड़ेंगे और सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ हैं गौरव धमनलाल।
Thank you, Vishal, and welcome Avinash to the program. A quick look at the headlines. Asian Development Bank retains India's economic growth forecast at 6.4% for the current financial year and 6.7% for the next. Domestic stocks close at fresh record highs. Sensex finishes near 67,100 points. Nifty settles above 19,800 level. And Brent crude hovers around $80 per barrel.
एशियाई विकास बैंक ने भारत का आर्थिक वृद्धि दर अनुमान चालू वित्त वर्ष के लिए 6.4% और अगले वित्त वर्ष के लिए 6.7% पर बनाए रखा। घरेलू शेयर बाजार रिकॉर्ड ऊंचाई पर पहुंचकर हुए बंद। सेंसेक्स 67,100 के नजदीक हुआ बंद। निफ्टी 19,800 के स्तर से ऊपर पहुंचा और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय बाजार में ब्रेंट कच्चे तेल की कीमतें रहीं $80 प्रति बैरल के आसपास।
We start with our first story. The Asian Development Bank ADB today retained India's economic growth forecast at 6.4% for the current financial year and 6.7% for the next. The ADB said robust domestic demand will continue to support the region's recovery. In an update to its Asian development outlook, the ADB said inflation is expected to continue to fall, approaching pre-pandemic levels as fuel and food prices decline. It forecasts 3.6% inflation this year for developing countries in Asia and 3.4% in 2024. The Indian economy grew 7.2% in the 2022-23 fiscal ended March 2023. Avinash, looking at the India's growth forecast, 7.2% is what we've already achieved. So by those standards, do you think, and the way the stock market is going, the economy and the forecasts, 6.4% and 6.7% are conservative estimates?
Yeah, I think good evening to everybody. Definitely, I think these numbers look conservative because the kind of tailwinds which we are seeing in the macro numbers, specifically, the kind of FDI flows India is attracting, plus the kind of corporate capex activity which is now touching record high levels, I would believe that, India is very well positioned to actually exceed these numbers. Although these numbers on the face of it appear to be quite good, I would believe that the only weak point for India is the export performance. I think exports have been hit very badly. The domestic market is obviously growing at a healthy pace. So if there are no further negative surprises on the export side, I think you could see a very sharp acceleration in the GDP growth number. But we'll have to wait for maybe another quarter or two before we expect the export markets also to stabilize and recover, from their lows. But nevertheless, this number point which has come in is definitely looking encouraging. And I think this is going to be supported by very strong corporate results from corporates and clearly more disbursement of money, which is going to make the banking sector also in India quite vibrant and healthy.
जी, अविनाश जी, आपने निर्यात के मोर्चे पर कुछ चिंताएं जरूर व्यक्त की हैं, तो ये क्या चिंताएं हैं, आप और जरा विस्तार से बता सकते हैं?
देखिए, पहली बात तो एक्सपोर्ट मार्केट इंडिया के लिए जो बड़ा है वो यूएस और यूरोप है। थोड़ा बहुत एशियन कंट्रीज भी है, लेकिन सबसे ज्यादा जो यूएस और यूरोप में जो दिक्कतें हो रही है, वहां के जो सेक्टर्स है, वहां के जो कंपनीज है, वो थोड़ी सी मैक्रो और इकोनॉमिक कंसर्न से जूझ रही है। और स्पेसिफिकली यूरोप की बात करें तो फार्मा, ऑटो कंपोनेंट एक्सपोर्ट्स, फिर उसके बाद इंजीनियरिंग एक्सपोर्ट्स, ये सारे जो ग्लोबली अलाइंड सेक्टर्स है, दूसरे जो बड़े ग्लोबली अलाइंड सेक्टर्स वो मेटल्स भी है, उसके बाद आईटी सर्विसेज भी है। तो हमने देखा कि अभी जो भी आईटी कंपनीज के नतीजे आ गए, वहां मैनेजमेंट की बहुत कॉस्ट थी, ऑर्डर बुक विन्स भी बहुत स्लोली आए, तो कहीं ना कहीं देखिए एक्सपोर्ट का मार्केट अभी भी पूरी तरह से हेल्दी नहीं है, वहां पे काफी कठिनाइयां दिख रही है और यही रीजन है कि हमारा एक्सपोर्ट का नंबर पिछले महीने का करीबन 23% डाउन था। तो ये डेफिनेटली चिंता की बात है क्योंकि हमारे लिए फॉरेन एक्सचेंज करेंसी जुटाना बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है और सर्विसेज एक्सपोर्ट्स तो हमारे लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। पहले आईटी से हम लोग बहुत फॉरेन एक्सचेंज कमाते थे, अभी जो मोमेंटम है वो काफी स्लो डाउन हो गया और यही मैं कहना चाह रहा था कि डोमेस्टिक इकोनॉमी तो बहुत अच्छी तरह से चल रही है, डोमेस्टिक मार्केट में ग्रोथ सारे सेक्टर से दिख रहा है, लेकिन एक्सपोर्ट वाली जो कंपनियां है और एक्सपोर्ट मार्केट से ज्यादातर जिनका रेवेन्यू और प्रॉफिट आता है वहां पे थोड़ी सी दिक्कत होगी जब तक यूरोप रिकवर नहीं होता।
So when we talk of our export market, we always looked at China historically, and we know right now that they're slower than expected post-pandemic recovery. It's not as fast as we thought it would. What do you think is the time frame that this would last, and we still have time to make up on areas, and I know it may not be the services sector, but other sectors where we can actually take use of this opportunity?
I think to a large extent, the China plus factor is already playing out on markets like India because we have been talking to many corporates and they've been telling us that most of the corporates based in US or Europe are now reducing their dependence on China. And obviously they're not keeping only China as their key vendor. They are looking at countries like India which could act as alternative suppliers of, segments like API products, pharmaceutical, products, or maybe even for auto component kind of, products. So definitely the trend has changed, but to get a better picture and a larger contribution from this macro development will take some time. But definitely we are already seeing in the pharmaceutical segment, most of the API companies, which are largely battling with China, the competition has reduced, the price margins which had come down significantly in December, January. Things have started improving. The margin improvement has started, looking better in the numbers for most of these companies. So clearly, I think, these 2-3 sectors will initially benefit. Later on, there are a lot of other sectors like metals, for that reason, pharmaceuticals. So these are sectors where possibly India could globally be very competitive. But nevertheless, it's going to take a long time. It's not going to happen in the short term. And that is what we are already seeing in the export data number. Things will improve, but it will take some time.
जी अविनाश जी, एशिया की और प्रमुख अर्थव्यवस्थाओं की अगर हम बात करें, जो चाहे वो चीन की अर्थव्यवस्था हो या जापान की अर्थव्यवस्था हो, एशियाई विकास बैंक ने जो आज ये अनुमान जो जाहिर किया है, जो व्यक्त किया है भारत की आर्थिक वृद्धि दर का, उन बाकी अर्थव्यवस्थाओं की तुलना में हमारी अर्थव्यवस्था आपको कहाँ खड़ी दिखाई पड़ती है इस समय?
ये देखिए, ये कोई डाउट नहीं है कि इंडिया अभी एक ग्लोबल इकोनॉमी है और यहाँ का जो डोमेस्टिक मार्केट है वो सारे बड़े एमएनसी कंपनीज के लिए, फॉरेन कंपनीज के लिए एक बहुत बड़ा मार्केट है। इनफैक्ट हाल ही में प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी फ्रांस को गए थे तो काफी बड़े डील्स डिफेंस के लिए, सेमीकंडक्टर चिप्स के लिए अनाउंस हो चुके हैं। तो यहाँ पे आईफोन भी अभी इंडिया में बन रहा है, सेमीकंडक्टर चिप्स भी इंडिया में बनेंगे। तो फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट ये बहुत बड़ी मात्रा में अगले 3-5 साल में जरूर आएगा और उस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से मुझे लग रहा है कि पूरे एशिया पैक में अगर हम इंडिया को दूसरे एशियन कंट्रीज से कंपेयर करें तो इंडिया काफी वेल पोजिशन्ड है। यहाँ पे पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम भी स्टेबल है, इकोनॉमिक कंडीशंस भी काफी हेल्दी है और सबसे बड़ी बात, फॉरेन निवेशकों का बहुत बड़ा विश्वास है कि इस गवर्नमेंट बेसिकली फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट को काफी इंसेंटिवाइज करेगी। तो उस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से मुझे लग रहा है कि माहौल तो बहुत अच्छा है, बट नंबर्स को आने के लिए और इसका जो रिजल्ट आने के लिए आपको शायद 6-12 महीने वेट करना पड़े, क्योंकि अनाउंसमेंट्स आने के बाद जो एक्चुअल ट्रिकल डाउन इफेक्ट होता है, कैपिटल इनफ्लो आता है, उसके लिए थोड़ा समय लगता है। बट डेफिनेटली हम सही रास्ते पे है और मुझे लग रहा है कि आने वाले 1-2 सालों में इंडिया का जो एफडीआई है वो मेरे ख्याल से जैसे चाइना को बहुत बड़ी मात्रा में मिला था वो ही इंडिया में होने वाला है।
जी, और अब बात करते हैं शेयर बाजारों की। अच्छी खबर है शेयर बाजारों से भी। घरेलू शेयर बाजार आज करीब 0.5% की तेजी से नई रिकॉर्ड ऊंचाई पर पहुंचकर बंद हुए। मजबूत वैश्विक संकेतों के बीच घरेलू बाजारों में भी बढ़त दर्ज हुई। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 67,100 के करीब बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी 19,800 के स्तर से ऊपर बंद हुआ। सेंसेक्स 302 अंक की वृद्धि से 67,097 पर बंद हुआ। निफ्टी भी 84 अंक बढ़कर 19,833 पर पहुंच गया। व्यापक बाजार में बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स 0.63% और स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स 0.61% की बढ़त के साथ बंद हुए।
Domestic benchmark stock indices today witnessed gains of around 0.5% to close at fresh record highs. Both stocks gained amid positive global cues. The Sensex at the Bombay Stock Exchange closed near 67,100 points. The Nifty at the National Stock Exchange ended above 19,800 level. The Sensex gained 302 points to finish at 67,097. The Nifty also added 84 points to settle at 19,833. In the broader market at the BSE, the mid-cap index rose 0.63% and the small-cap climbed 0.61%. In the Sensex index, which is a pack of 30 companies, shares of 20 firms appreciated while 10 depreciated. Among the top gainers, NTPC inched up 2.9%, followed by Bajaj Finance, which climbed 2.2%. IndusInd Bank gained 2.1%. On the other hand, TCS declined 0.8%, Bharti Airtel fell 0.7%, and Maruti slipped 0.6% each. In sectoral indices at the BSE, all sectors logged gains except the tech index, which fell marginally by 0.1%, while the IT sector index ended flat. Utilities surged 1.2% and telecommunication sector rose 1.1%. Industrials and power both added 0.8%. The overall market breadth was positive as shares of 1,998 companies rose while 1,413 fell. A total of 126 shares remained unchanged. Avinash, before we move into the details of the stock market, the RBI's rate hikes seem to have reached their peak. Commodity prices have become more benign and contributing to improved profit margins as company results will show. The macroeconomic environment is definitely favorable and inflation and current account deficit averages under control. NPAs have mostly been removed from the banking system. Corporate capital expenditure CAPEX is expected to accelerate. So, good picture, robust FII inflows, strong DII investment. Are we at the beginning of a bull run, and if so, what could be some correcting factors?
Yeah, can you please repeat the question, please?
Right. So we have a great picture of the economy from, the RBI rate hikes seeming to have reached their peak and everything. And we are seeing the market, definitely a bullish market. So are we at the beginning of a bull run which is to continue? And if so, what would be some of the correcting factors?
No, I think we are already in a bull run. I think it's not the start of a bull run, but the bull market has already started since the month of April 23. And I think the major reason for this has been a huge kind of liquidity surge from the FIs since April 23 onwards. We have been seeing that, the markets have been seeing more than expected FI flows, largely because of, FIs are now allocating more money for India. In fact, the Chinese allocations also have reduced, and that has also contributed to a significant surge in FI flows in the Indian markets. And I think most of the surge has been largely on the back of the currency factor also. If all of you have a look at the dollar index has corrected significantly. Normally, there is empirical evidence that whenever the dollar index goes below 100, we see a huge inflow of dollars in the country, and that is because the FIs always look at dollar-based returns. More importantly, the kind of policies given by this government, especially in terms of infrastructure, in terms of FDI, has attracted a lot of FDI as well as FI flows, and I think this is going to continue. The markets are looking forward for a better earnings kind of number for not only the Q1 of FY24, but definitely for the entire financial year for April 24. And this is on the back of very strong volume growth, specifically for domestic-based sectors like automobiles, auto components, capital goods, real estate, cement. Of course, export markets have been under pressure, and therefore we could see a little bit of underperformance from the IT companies, from the metal companies. But I think clearly on a very broader basis, earnings growth has been one of the best in the last few years. And that is the reason we believe that this bull rally will continue. But yes, we would be looking also at selective profit booking, levels coming from time to time, and that would be healthy for the market. So I think investors have to be careful on what they select now, because obviously the markets have rallied significantly. Now they are closer to 19,800 plus odd levels on the Nifty index. So I would suggest that, investors should take a long-term view. The India story will definitely continue, but I think you need to also look at it from a stock-specific view and look at it with a little cautious approach rather than, looking at the entire market. I think the idea is basically to stock pick good quality businesses from growing sectors.
So what do you think some of these following risk factors, the effect they would have on the market, like inflation in developed countries, which is still there, the Indian market, well, they could perceive it to be overvalued, and the possibility of general elections in India next year, would that affect investment?
No, I think this factor is already partly discounted in the market. I think India is definitely, discounting, aggressive kind of rate hike kind of scenario, because with a good monsoon, hopefully food inflation is likely to come down, and food inflation accounts for a large component of the overall, WPI index number. So my sense is that, inflation will definitely be a concern, but over the next 1 or 2 quarters, hopefully if crude remains soft, we have good monsoon, food prices come down, then I think we probably see inflation worries going off. The bigger issue would be, any kind of, macro kind of development in the European or the US markets. I think both these markets have been trading at clearly, sub, peak levels. And I think concerns have been growing as to whether these economies would even be able to grow into single digits, at least in the next financial year. More importantly, the bigger trigger for the Indian market as well as the global market is the culmination of the Russia-Ukraine war. If this culminates quickly and there is a solution to this problem, then I think you could see the entire global market, turning positive and sentiment becoming extremely strong. So I would say that, India is definitely well positioned in this scenario also, and we should not be overly worried about higher interest rates, because the core demand in the economy has been growing very rapidly. And I think this is definitely an early sign of the fact that we could possibly see further higher levels in the market, but again on a selective basis and again on a slightly medium term scenario.
जी अविनाश जी, आज के कारोबार में हम नजर डालें तो आईटी को छोड़कर सभी सेक्टर हर निशान में बंद हुए हैं। आईटी सेक्टर को लेकर के आप क्या देखते हैं, क्या चिंताएं हैं आईटी सेक्टर के साथ, जो कि हम देख पा रहे हैं कि बहुत ज्यादा इसमें हमको बहुत ज्यादा उम्मीद अभी नहीं दिखाई पड़ रही है। क्या वजह आप देख पा रहे हैं इसके पीछे?
देखिए, मुझे लग रहा है कि आईटी सेक्टर में सबसे बड़ा जो प्रॉब्लम वही है कि यूएस और यूरोप में अभी भी डिमांड कंडीशंस काफी नरम है, वीक है, और नए ऑर्डर इनफ्लोज बहुत तेजी से कंपनीज को मिल नहीं रहे। वहां पे भी आईटी बजट्स जो एलोकेट होते हैं, वहां पे भी हमने देखा है कि काफी दिक्कतें हैं। काफी क्लाइंट्स ने अपने बजट्स कम किए हैं, किन्होंने तो कैंसिल कर दिए। तो ये जो मसला है वो कम से कम 1-2 क्वार्टर चलेगा। हालांकि एक बात क्लियर है कि इंडियन आईटी कंपनीज को सबसे बड़ा जो बेनिफिट है वो डोमेस्टिक मार्केट का भी है। डोमेस्टिक मार्केट में भी बड़े अपॉर्चुनिटीज डिजिटल के लिए आ रहे हैं। और ये बिजनेस में एक बात मैं बता दूं कि जो बड़ी आईटी कंपनीज है, जैसे टीसीएस हो गया, इन्फोसिस है, एचसीएल टेक है, इनका मॉडल एसेट लाइट है। ये सारी कैश रिच कंपनीज है, कर्जा बैलेंस शीट पे बिल्कुल नहीं है, तो इनके लिए दिक्कत ज्यादा नहीं रहेगी। बट जो ग्रोथ का जो स्टांस है, उसको आने के लिए शायद आपको 3-4 महीने या 6 महीना वेट करना पड़े। सितंबर के बाद होपफुली यूरोप और यूएस में इकोनॉमिक कंडीशंस अगर और सुधरती है तो हमको लग रहा है कि आईटी कंपनीज को जरूर फायदा होगा। बट तब तक के लिए मेरे ख्याल से ये एक छोटी रेंज में ही ट्रेड करेंगी।
So what would be your advice? How do you think investors should navigate a bullish market in proportion of the mix of their investments, of whether it's gold, mutual funds, direct equity, bank deposits? Any change you would recommend?
No, I think, for a long-term investor, I think he should definitely have a mix of mutual funds and direct equity. And of course, he should also look at other asset classes like real estate and gold. But I think the focus should be on equity, and within equity, I would believe, that stick to sectors where the domestic market is going to grow extremely strong. I mean, sectors which are domestic facing are largely the automotive, auto components, capital goods, real estate, cement, infrastructure. These are sectors where I believe you could see long-term kind of earning stories coming out even at these current levels. However, export-oriented companies, I think you need to be a little careful, because as I mentioned earlier, export markets both in the US as well as in Europe are not in the best of shape, and they could a good recovery is visible. So I think you need to position your portfolio by looking at the large cap companies, having a small exposure in the small and mid cap companies, and of course, somebody who's interested in mutual funds should follow SIP, and I believe the SIP timeframe should be at least 3 to 4 years.
जी, और अब नजर डाल लेते हैं रुपए के प्रदर्शन पर। विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में रुपया आज डॉलर के मुकाबले 82 रुपए 10 पैसे प्रति डॉलर के स्तर पर बंद हुआ। विश्व की 6 प्रमुख मुद्राओं की तुलना में डॉलर की मजबूती दर्शाने वाला डॉलर सूचकांक अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार में 100.19 पर चल रहा था। रुख करते हैं एशियाई और यूरोपीय बाजारों का। एशियाई शेयर बाजार आज मिले जुले कारोबार के साथ बंद हुए। जापान का निकेई 1.2% लाभ में रहा और दक्षिण कोरिया के कोस्पी में 0.6% की बढ़त दर्ज हुई। सिंगापुर का स्ट्रेट्स टाइम्स इंडेक्स और चीन का शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स दोनों सपाट बंद हुए, जबकि हांगकांग का हैंग सेंग 0.3% की गिरावट में रहा। यूरोपीय शेयर बाजारों में भी अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार के दौरान मिला जुला रुख रहा। समाचार लिखे जाने तक लंदन के FTSE 100 में 1.5% की तेजी थी। फ्रांस का कैक 40 0.3% की बढ़त में चल रहा था, जबकि जर्मनी का डेक्स बिना किसी उतार चढ़ाव के सपाट कारोबार कर रहा था।
A quick look at the U.S. markets. U.S. stocks advanced yesterday amid solid earnings from the banking sector. The Dow witnessed the longest streak of daily gains in more than 2 years. The Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed 1.1%, the Nasdaq Composite gained 0.8%, and the S&P 500 index rose 0.7%. Avinash, your views on the Dow Jones, are they also looking at a bull run maybe?
Yeah, I think here also, the kind of earnings season which has come out has been quite encouraging. Although, yesterday Goldman Sachs came out with a very poor set of numbers. So I think, in this earnings season, in all probability, if most of the numbers are better than expectation, then I think you could see even the Dow Jones, recording higher levels. Nevertheless, here I think the key action on the Dow Jones would be felt on 25th and 26th July when Mr. Powell will be sounding the Fed's policy. In all probability, the market has already discounted a 25 basis hike, but I think the commentary which will come out from the governor is going to be very crucial because unlike earlier, when there was a pause, the markets are now expecting that possibly in the next 2 to 3 months, what kind of stance the Fed takes on interest rates going forward is going to be very critical, and that actually will decide the trend for the Dow Jones in the coming few weeks.
So do you think that commentary would have an effect on the Indian markets too?
Yeah, it would have, because clearly, if Mr. Powell indicates that there could be 3 or 4 more interest rate hikes in the pipeline, then this is definitely not good news, because that means that inflation fears would again spike up, and I think markets would definitely get a little bit of the spike from volatility. So I think although the markets have digested a 25 basis hike, but in case, the governor spells out that there could be another 2 or 3 hikes in the next, 12 to 15 months, then I think this is definitely not good news, and I think that would obviously impact the sentiment here in Indian markets also.
Right. We move on to our next story now.
कोयला मंत्रालय ने कोयला और लिग्नाइट खदानों की स्टार रेटिंग के लिए पंजीकरण और स्वमूल्यांकन की अंतिम तिथि 15 जुलाई से बढ़ाकर 25 जुलाई कर दी है। अधिक भागीदारी और सटीक मूल्यांकन सुनिश्चित करने के लिए ऐसा किया गया है। इस वर्ष 30 मई को स्टार रेटिंग की अधिसूचना जारी होने के बाद 14 जुलाई को 337 खदानों का पंजीकरण कराया जा चुका है। स्टार रेटिंग प्रणाली का महत्व टिकाऊ खनन प्रथाओं को बढ़ावा देना और कोयला तथा लिग्नाइट खानों के समग्र प्रदर्शन में सुधार करना है।
So when we talk of energy, and there's a lot of conversation going on about green energy, India wanting to move and migrate into, green energy sources, good practices, better practices in our coal mines is also a step in that direction?
Yeah, definitely. I think green energy and renewable energy has been the focus of this government. And I think going forward, the government has clearly incentivized a lot of, companies as well as projects which are investing in real, green energy kind of initiatives. So I think it's definitely a good direction. The sense is that over the next 5 years, the government plans that more and more green energy projects, renewable projects are floated not only by domestic but even international companies in India, which will actually reduce the pollution levels as well as, generate clean energy to most of the consuming sectors. In fact, most of the sectors in India now have opted also for green energy for their energy requirements, and which I think is going to gather further momentum in the next, say, 2 to 3 years.
So there are many startups which are coming, which are investing in research and development in this. Would you advise, even if they are small cap investment in them, at least some of them in the portfolio?
Yeah, I think, investors who have a little larger risk appetite, because startup businesses are inherently little risky businesses, but investors who have the appetite, the risk appetite, and can obviously opt for some contra investments could definitely look at this pocket as an investment opportunity, because clearly green energy and renewable projects, whichever smaller startups are working on them, and if these get commercialized very soon, and there is a good amount of scalability here, that could offer very good returns for the investors.
Right. Moving on to oil prices, Brent crude today hovered around $80 amid expectations that the U.S. Federal Reserve will stop raising interest rates soon. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at $80 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate crude prices were at $75.90 per barrel when reports last came in. Wanting your views, Avinash, on will oil prices soar or stabilize, in the mid $75 to $80 range, because Saudi Arabia has cut output by 1 million barrels per day, and the lowest, which is the lowest in 2 years, and earlier there was an OPEC cut too. So, what do you feel? Because world growth economy is in the slow lane, India being the exception, and China is anyway struggling. Oil prices, in your opinion, where will they stabilize?
No, I think clearly, oil prices are unlikely to move up in a hurry, and despite the fact that Saudi Arabia last time decided to cut supplies, I think oil prices have continued to remain in a very narrow price band, and that clearly indicates that these price trends are largely because of a fallout what is happening in China. China and India are one of the largest consumers of oil. And with China economy underperforming, I would not be surprised that oil prices would remain in a narrow range at least for the next 3 to 6 months. So this is definitely good news for India, because reports suggest that now, after buying Russian oil at very remunerative, attractive prices, India is now looking forward to buy, Iraq oil, which is, considered to be more cheaper, and where possibly the government is going to enter into a contract very soon. So I think this is definitely a big trigger point for India, because every drop in the crude oil price adds a little more push to the GDP growth rate. So we have a direct correlation to the crude oil requirement, since a large part of it is still imported. For us, it is definitely a good sign, and I think for the global economies, unless some turnaround happens, unless the economy moves into a healthy trajectory, we are unlikely to see crude oil prices moving up in a very significant manner. Geopolitically also, I think the Russia-Ukraine issue has also resolved. There are not many kind of problems now reported there, so oil prices are unlikely to remain volatile. You could expect a softer trend at least for the next 3 to 6 months.
और अब कीमती धातुओं की बात कर लेते हैं। मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज में अगस्त अनुबंध वाला सोना आज 50 रुपए की तेजी से 59,815 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर कारोबार कर रहा था। वहीं दूसरी ओर सितंबर अनुबंध वाली चांदी 180 रुपए की मजबूती से 76,285 रुपए प्रति किलो के स्तर पर चल रही थी। अंतर्राष्ट्रीय बाजारों पर नजर डालें तो न्यूयॉर्क मर्केंटाइल एक्सचेंज में अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार के दौरान सोना मंदी के साथ $2,018.20 प्रति औंस पर कारोबार कर रहा था, जबकि चांदी तेजी के साथ $25.30 प्रति औंस पर चल रही थी। अविनाश जी, बहुत ही संक्षेप में जानना चाहेंगे, अभी हमने सोने को 61,000 के पार भी जाता देखा था, अब ये जो थोड़ी कमी दिखाई पड़ रही है, क्या वजह है इसके पीछे?
मुझे लग रहा है कि कहीं ना कहीं मैक्रो कंडीशंस थोड़े से ठीक हो रहे हैं, और ऊपर से मुझे लग रहा है कि आपको और एक क्वार्टर शायद इंतजार करना पड़े कि वो एक्चुअल ट्रेंड क्या रहेगा।
राइट।
मुझे लग रहा है कि ये जो ट्रेंड है ये अभी फिलहाल कम से कम आने वाले 3-4 महीने के लिए रहना चाहिए।
राइट। थैंक यू सो मच अविनाश फॉर योर इनपुट, इट वाज वंडरफुल, थैंक यू फॉर स्पेयरिंग टाइम। एंड नाउ बिफोर वी क्लोज, अ क्विक रिमाइंडर ऑफ द हेडलाइंस। Asian Development Bank retains India's economic growth forecast at 6.4% for the current financial year and 6.7% for the next. Domestic stocks close at fresh record highs. Sensex finishes near 67,100 points. Nifty settles above 19,800 level. And Brent hovers around $80 per barrel. And that's it in this edition. Namaskar.
Market Mantra.